What's going on, all you sinners? Father Sin here. Have a great episode lined up for you, as always. Spoke to Scott Johnson, met him on Facebook. He's got a very unique podcast. Stay tuned. Check it out. Check his out after you finish this episode.
I don't think anyone has the right to take the life when I'm under hallucination.
Hey everyone, we're here tonight, joined with Scott Johnson. How you doing tonight, Scott?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing marvelous. Wore out as usual. Yeah, long day work and back at work again, doing this lovely podcast.
Yeah. Well, this is the fun job, right?
Yeah, this is fun. This is a passion project of mine. Wait a minute, aren't you a podcaster?
Actually, I am. Yeah.
Yeah. So is that like your full-time job, or do you have a?
It's not. No, I can't say podcasting is my full-time job. I do two different podcasts, and one of them is related to my job, but the other one isn't. So we can get into all that if you want.
So yeah, I just knew of the one. I didn't know you had another podcast. So is the one that I listen to, is that the one related to your job? You're like a journalist or something?
No, that one is unrelated. I started podcasting in 2012, and that was related to my business. I've had a computer services business for about 20 years, and I do like tips, or I do repairs, computer repairs, upgrades, putting a solid state drive in to make it faster, data recovery, all that kind of stuff. And I sell laptops. And so I've been doing that for about 20 years. But like back in 2012, that's when I discovered podcasts. And I thought, I should have a podcast for my business, because I had already been doing a blog and an email newsletter for a long time, probably 10 years before that. And so every Monday I would write a blog and I would send out an email newsletter with, really, the email is just, here's what the blog is about this week, and there's a link to go back to the blog. And it's brought me a ton of business because, people look for what's in my newsletter and in my blog are computer tips. How to do this in Windows, or watch out for this scam that's going around, or, it's time to upgrade to Windows 10 if you're still using Windows 7, stuff like that. It's designed specifically for people who are not techie people. It's
right.
all plain English. So, so I get a lot of people that subscribe to that, and they read my blog and everything. And then I saw podcasts, and I thought, well, that's just another way to get a different group of people. Maybe there is some overlap, I'm sure, but some people like to read and some people like to listen on their way to work, So that's when I started doing that. And so I did that for, I've done like over 300 episodes of the Computer Podcast. But then a little over a year ago, it was a year in July, I thought that's when it started. Prior to that, I had the idea, because the podcasts that I like the best are the ones that tell stories, and not necessarily fiction, but stuff that's actually happened to people. And so I wanted to hear stories, or people telling firsthand stories about just unusual things. And I couldn't find any podcast that was doing that, at least not the way I wanted it to be. You could hear a lot of stories, but doesn't mean they're necessarily interesting. So I thought, maybe there is a need for this, and maybe I'll just make this myself, since it's what I want to hear. And so that's what I did.
So you say unusual things like space creatures, aliens, Bigfoot, stuff like that, or
Actually, you would never hear any of those things on my show because I don't cover anything that's related to the paranormal.
okay,
That's actually one of three categories that I don't cover because the reason for that is not that it's not interesting, but the reason is because I try to for each of the stories that I do, I try to verify that it actually happened. And of course, with paranormal, you can't really verify anything.
right? Not scientifically, at least.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I don't do anything with the paranormal. I try not to do anything that's strictly a medical story, because a lot of people have the stories about, I had this weird disease and doctor said I wasn't going to live, and now it's 5 years later and I made it. And it's just, to me, that's just not interesting enough. I'm sure it was interesting and traumatic for that person to go through that, but for me, it doesn't grab my attention like some other stories would. And then the other one is the third category would be anything where the primary topic is drugs or sex, and not because I'm a prude or anything, but I had one guy approach me saying, "Hey, I wanted to tell you about this time I got so drunk and I lost my virginity with this elderly couple," and well.
What?
Yeah, I didn't really. It just doesn't. It's to me that's kind of boring.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that I'd want to hear that guy tell that story. So I try to make each one of my stories when they're on my podcast. I want people. Here's what I'm picturing: somebody looking at their phone. You know how you subscribe to a bunch of podcasts, but for me at least, I never have time to listen to all of them. So I kind of cherry pick which episodes I want to listen to based on the title. So I'm picturing my listeners looking at their phone, looking down the list, and they see something like Alyssa's abuser set himself on fire. And I think, okay, they're going to look at that and say, okay, I got to hear that story. And that's what I try to do with every one of my episodes. And that is an actual title of one of my episodes, actually.
Yeah, that's what I was getting ready to ask.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've went through and I've actually checked out yours. I know there wasn't no paranormal or anything like that, but usually you say unusual or something like that. That's kind of like where my mind goes to.
Right. Yeah, that's what a lot of people would think of. Sure.
Yeah, I checked out the Chloe accidentally started a business, and Whitney was shot 12 times, which was something I was really intrigued with because that was close to home.
Mm-hmm.
And how did you end up getting in touch with Whitney?
Oh, I'd have to. I saw it in the news.
Okay.
It was a news story, of course. When a mass shooting, I mean, it's not that it's unusual news, unfortunately, anymore. But I did see that in the news, and I saw that there were a lot of aspects of that story that really made it interesting for me. One was that she was shot so many times, and she walked into the building not even knowing that there was a shooting going on, and she got shot, and what her incentive to not just give up and die was her kids. She was telling the police officer that was trying to rescue her, that was her words: "I have 2 kids. You have to come and save me. These kids need their mother." And she did survive.
Right. That was, oh man, that was a strong, impactful story. Mm-hmm. And for the people that aren't familiar with the story, it was an active mass shooting. It was down in Cincinnati, if I'm not mistaken, down at the Fifth Third building.
It was at the Fifth Third. It wasn't at the Fifth Third Bank, not one of their branches, but at the actual headquarters for Fifth Third Bank. Yeah.
And she was shot. She was shot 12 times, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, there were 2 different volleys of bullets. She was the front door to the bank or to that building was a revolving door, and she was getting into work and she was on the phone, because she was arriving slightly late, so she was on a conference call that had already started, and she walked into the revolving door, and she got halfway through. So the back part of the door had closed behind her, and the front part of the door had not yet completely opened, and so she was kind of in the middle there, and the shooter saw the movement in the door, and he just immediately shot like 7 times, and she went down. And so at that point, she couldn't stand up. Even though she wasn't even shot in the legs, she couldn't stand up. She didn't know why. So she didn't know what to do other than she said, I should just call my husband because it looks like I'm probably going to die here. And so she reached for her cell phone, and he again saw that movement, and he shot her 5 more times. And fortunately, most of the bullets went down her right arm and her right side. There were a couple that were, spread across the rest of her body, but most of them went down the right side and didn't hit a major artery or any organ. So, I mean, she was bleeding a lot, but that's what contributed to the fact that she was able to survive.
Man, that's intense. Just even hearing you tell it back to me is that's a lot to take in. I mean, how did you go about approaching her? Because that's something really, really tough to get someone to talk about, surviving something like that, or someone that's been through something like that.
Absolutely, yeah. And that was one of the things that I try to do when I'm approaching someone like that is, it's a fine line. You don't want to cross the line. I mean, you want the story to be entertaining for the listeners and even emotional for the listener, but you don't want to cross the line to just strict exploitation, So there's a fine line there. But when I approached Whitney, what I told her was 2 things. One, it's an important story to get out, and it's a story that people would want to hear. But the other factor is the fact that she is now a really strong gun, not control, but she's working hard to solve the problem of mass shootings. And the solutions that she's coming up with are reasonable solutions. It's not just, make all the guns illegal, like what some people want to do. So that was the other factor when I approached her. Not only would you be able to tell your story, but you'll also be able to raise awareness about your cause and have my audience know about that. And, all the people in the future that listen to this episode are going to hear about it as well. So I believe she's appeared before Congress. And I think that just this week was the 1-year anniversary of the shooting, because I think it happened in September.
I'd have to double check. There's been so many. I researched so many of these, and it all seems like it runs together. But I really do like how you approached that and said it wasn't directly gun control, but actually stopping gun violence and mass shootings and stuff like that. I'm sure there's got to be a way to approach it without trying to piss off both sides at the same time.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So
absolutely. That's what usually happens. You just get each side arguing with the other and nothing gets done. And what she's proposing are more reasonable solutions that just about everybody can agree on. And I wouldn't be able to outline those solutions specifically right now, but
right.
He has a website. If you go on my website on that show, she would be able to. There's a link to her site which explains everything, and she explains a lot of it at the end of the episode as well.
Right. Well, why don't you drop them links since we're already on the topic real quick? That way, if anyone want to look into that, they can hop over there. You guys can do that after the episode, of course, but I do want to have that out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the website is whatwasthatlike.com. And that's of course the name of the show too, because I find people with really extremely unusual stories, and I ask them, what was that like? So I was happy to find out that domain name was available.
Yeah, I like the name of that. That it's real catchy too.
Mm-hmm.
So would that be considered like your craziest story you heard, or
no? Nope. I cannot say that would be the craziest one. There are actually 3 stories come to mind as far as what would really be kind of out there. So far, my most popular episode is one called Marina Was Stalked. And this is about a young girl who was dating a guy, or actually she wasn't even dating this guy. She was friends with this guy, and she started dating another guy. And this guy that she was friends with didn't like the fact that he wasn't going to go past the friend zone. And Marina ended up getting pregnant as well. And this guy wanted her to tell everyone on Facebook, everywhere, that he was the father, not this other guy. And so he just turned into this psycho. And so she'd be in her bedroom. She lived at her parents' house, and she was, because she was taking some college classes, so she still lived at home. And she'd see him out in the street at night, and he'd be revving his motorcycle really loud, and he'd be calling her. There was one night where he enlisted the aid of a friend of his, and they texted her phone over 400 times. And I mean, just really weird stuff. And so she, one morning, she being pregnant, she was kind of sick and slept too late to be able to go to class. So she just figured, okay, I'm going to skip class today. She went downstairs, got something to eat, took a shower, came back up. And when she went back up to her bedroom, he was standing there in her bedroom. And it's like they stared at each other for a minute. But then she got her phone, she started to call the cops. And of course, he knocked it out of her hand, and they scuffled and fought for a while. And she finally was able to get away and run toward the stairs. But he caught up with her and grabbed her and held her over the stairs as if he was going to drop her. And of course, the whole time she's telling, and of course, she's pregnant as well, which that was her main concern, was, is he going to hurt the baby? But the whole time she's telling this, you can just hear the emotion in her voice, because it was actually the first time she had verbally told this whole story to anyone. And it was on the podcast. And that story is, just because of the emotional nerve that it touches with people that hear it, it's just wild. People love that one. And so that's probably my most popular one so far. But as far as weird, there are a couple of other ones. There's one.
Well, hold on before we jump in there,
sure.
Scott. Now, I mean, that's pretty in depth right there.
It is.
That's like, just sitting here hearing you talk about that gets like my heart racing. How'd you come across to meet her?
I'd have to think back on it. It may have been on Instagram.
Really?
Yeah, because I post on Instagram almost every day. And whenever someone follows me on Instagram, I send them a message saying, hey, I do this podcast. What's your craziest story? Let me know what you got. And of course, 99% of the people that reply to that, I have to reject, because, I have a very high standard on what I consider to be an unusual story. But she, I think it was on Instagram that she said, well, I was stalked by this guy one time. And I said, okay, well, let's hear more about that. And it really helped that she was a good storyteller. That's an important factor, because, you could have somebody that has a great story, but if it doesn't, if they tell the whole story and they're done in 10 minutes, that, it just doesn't. I tried to have it at least 30 minutes, and I've had some go more than an hour. Yeah. But it's got to be at least a 30-minute episode, in order to really engage the listener.
Yeah, you do a very good job putting your episodes together. You do it kind of like a documentary. Mm-hmm. I can't even talk tonight, man. Yeah, but it's one of the things well put, man.
When I'm assembling the episode, one of the things that I don't like about some podcasts, and I usually will unsubscribe, is when the podcast starts and then you've got 2 or 3 minutes of commercials, and then you've got a couple of co-hosts saying, "Hey, how was your week this week? What happened?" And it's just, for my show, I like to get right into the story, and that way people don't have to wait. They're not going to worry. They don't have to think, okay, how much do I have to fast forward, before I get to the actual thing that I want to hear.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I like the way you do it though, man. and you do a very
Thank
good
you.
job telling the story. That's the main thing to me is you've got good candor and cadence, and it's just sitting here talking to you about some of these other stories. It's just like it's got my heart racing. I'm like, oh my God, come on, tell me more, man. Wait, I'll go back and check out go check the episode out again.
Well, that's why
So-
a lot of people, when they find out, they listen to the most recent episode, and then they look at the list of episodes, past episodes, and they just download all of them, which is great.
Yeah.
That's what I like to hear.
Yeah, I've got them downloaded. I just got to find the time to get through the rest of them.
Yeah.
Because I like stuff like that. You should that'd be like a good TV show, man. Because it's. I mean, you had another one on there about what was it? Something to do with a rattlesnake. That was on my next. That was my next one because I'm a crazy guy and I'm into reptiles and snakes and stuff like that. And just like,
You'll probably like that one then.
oh yeah.
That was an unexpected. Well, of course, most rattlesnakes are unexpected encounters, but this guy's wife was just out. Or do you want me to tell you if you're about to listen to it? I don't want to spoil anything for you.
Yeah, don't spoil that one. I want
Okay.
you to get back into your the crazy and what you consider bizarre.
Okay. Well, one of the other two that I would talk about that are really unusual, one of them is called Tyson Was Abducted. And this is about a young man who he worked at retail, and he was leaving work one night, walking across the parking lot, and he was approached by this Land Rover who had two guys in it, and they ended up throwing him in the Land Rover and taking him to some house. He didn't know where he was being taken. They took him to this house out in the middle of nowhere. They beat him, and all kinds of bad stuff happened there. And he ended up being held there for for about a year and a half before he was able to escape. And yeah, and just what he described what happened there. And I mean, this is, if anything can cause PTSD in someone, something like that would, because he was forced to do things. I mean, he was beaten constantly, and but it was kind of the guy that was there, the leader, was considered himself kind of a god. It was like a kind of a cult thing.
Oh,
And
wow.
They ended up. They also abducted two other people, two girls, and they were there. They were held there for a while. They ended up getting pregnant, and I mean, just really bizarre stuff. But the weird part is you think, okay, at the end of the story, he escapes. And yeah, that's what happens. He was able to escape, but he got away. And in telling the cop he found a cop to tell the story to, and he did a whole report and everything, police report, but the cops didn't do anything because
What?
the cops were looking at it as, to us, this looks like could have been just a domestic disturbance, and it's your word against his. And as a matter of fact, because Tyson, as he was trying to escape, he stabbed the guy, the leader guy, and the cops said, if he was actually to pursue it, to press charges, we'd have to arrest you because you did admit that you stabbed him. So no criminal charges or anything ever came of it. But that's when the story takes another weird turn, because if you think about it, this guy's been just gone from his family and friends and work for a year and a half. Of course, his phone bill didn't get paid. That got shut off. So he goes to his house where he lived with his parents. Gone. They don't even live there anymore. He was finally able to track them down. And because of what he was forced to do as far as like sexual acts and things like that while he was being held at that house, his family disowned him. He had a sister, and the sister was now telling everyone that she was an only child. It's like he's not their son anymore. Can you imagine being rejected by your family after going through all of that? That's That's why I consider this one to be kind of a weird story.
Well, that's really messed up because
Mhm.
all that stuff was out of his control too, and that wasn't on his own free will.
Right.
What they were forcing him to do. I mean,
Right.
that's like survival.
Hmm.
I mean,
Yep.
man.
And it was the same thing with him. This was the first time he'd actually told that story verbally. I found him on Reddit. He did a Reddit AMA, and I saw the questions were being asked and the story that he was being told or the story that he was telling, and I thought, man, I gotta talk to this guy.
That sounds like something like you'd see like on like some kind of thriller movie or something like that.
Mhm.
But this is a true story, and
Right.
that's even scarier. And
Yeah.
man,
Hmm. But now he's doing much better. This has been, I don't know how many, it's been maybe 5 years ago that happened, maybe longer than that. I have to check on it. But he's now married and has a house, has a job. And so he's, reasonably gotten back into society. But the whole time he was telling me that story, he has a security blanket, and he was holding that blanket just to be able to hang on and tell the whole story.
yeah.
But good for him, man. He's made progress.
Well, that's good, man. I mean, yeah. A lot of people go through traumatic events like that, and they have a real hard time readjusting and reacclimating back to society and being productive and building relationships with other people.
Yeah.
And that's really big and really good and heartwarming to hear. But just to even think of that, I mean, this is a man.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, was he a man or a teenager back then? Or
he was. I would say he's probably early to mid 20s when he was abducted.
Wow. I just couldn't imagine that, and because you hear stories about like Elizabeth Smart and stuff like that, and
Right.
you think of and what was the other guy, Ariel Castro, the one up
I'm
here
not
in
familiar with
Cleveland.
that.
Yeah, he had all these different women in captivity for like 20 some years up here in Ohio, and got some of them pregnant and stuff like that. You hear stuff about that with females, but
Yeah.
you never picture a male subject having to go through something like that. And
Right.
that's just, yeah, that's really bizarre. Then the thing is, you tell me the family disowned him.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that just breaks my heart, man. And I'm a grown man, and that just breaks my heart to hear something like that.
Mm-hmm. And yet he was able to come back from all of that trauma and rejection and everything, and have a reasonably normal life now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm still just kind of floored by that one.
And that's not even the weirdest one.
Okay.
You ready for this?
There's no way. Hold on. Let's see here. I got to catch my breath here. So you found him on Reddit.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead and give it to me. Go ahead and give it to me.
Okay. There was a guy, and I don't know his actual. Actually, I do. I do know his actual name, but for the podcast, he wanted to use an alias, and that's understandable based on the story. But I do, for all the guests that come on my show, they have to sign a guest release, and the guest release has to have their actual name, but nobody ever sees that except me.
Right.
So, and this guy was also from a Reddit AMA. Well, he and his friends had kind of joked around in the past, and the question that came up was, if you had the opportunity to taste human flesh, and you could do it legally and ethically and maybe even in a healthy way, would you want to do that? Would you want to try it? And, they all kind of said, sure, yeah, why not? Knowing that really that opportunity would almost certainly never come up. Well, this guy was in a motorcycle accident, and he ended up having to have his foot amputated. And he asked the hospital if he could have his foot back. And they had it refrigerated the whole time. And so they had him fill out some paperwork, some disclaimers, liability releases, stuff like that. And they gave him his foot back. And he called up his friends one by one saying, hey, we always used to talk about this. Well, guess what? And most of them said, yeah, I'm in. And
what?
So they had and one of his friends was a chef. So they all got together for a brunch, and the chef cooked up a slice of his foot so that each person, there was like 10 of them there, maybe 11. So each person had like 1 or 2 bites so that, just to be able to taste it. It wasn't like a full meal, but they called it foot tacos. And there's pictures and everything of, in the frying pan and sauteing and each of them, they all tried it. And that, I think, is probably the most Still there?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm like, wow.
Now here's the funny thing is, when I was talking with him, I said, well, I think he may have asked me, would you ever try it if you could do it legally and ethically and all that? And I said, my response was, well, I'm vegan, so I wouldn't really be able to do that. But what he pointed out to me is that vegans do not eat any animal products, and because animals are not able to give their consent. But in this case, full consent was given. I mean, the reason that cannibalism is illegal in most places is because usually it involves killing someone. But in this case, nobody was killed. Full consent was given, and it was properly refrigerated, properly cooked, so that there wasn't a health risk of bacteria or anything like that. And so I never thought about it, but in some cases, cannibalism could be in line with veganism.
I don't know.
I know.
Personally, I want to do it just to try it. If it was something as a survival method or something like that,
right? Yeah, that's what you usually hear about.
To sustain yourself. That's probably the line I'd have to cross to get there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I liked how you try to sneak out of it saying veganism, and he called you out on it.
Right? Yeah.
I bet that kind of stopped you in your tracks there for a second too.
It did. I never would have considered that. Wow, maybe it is actually okay to be vegan and be a cannibal.
So hopefully they just stopped it doing that after that one time.
Yeah, it's just one time to say that they did it. And
they're not hitting up these body brokers. They're like, hey, can I get a thigh or something? Fresh.
Mm-hmm.
Something's been refrigerated, not in formaldehyde or anything like that. Yeah, we're gonna have a cookout. So
yeah, I think it was a one-time thing.
Yeah, that's and you said you just. I might have to start learning how to use Reddit, but I always hear horror stories and stuff on Reddit. It's fake, but you said you're able to verify your stories. How were you able to verify this? Because this sounds really, really far-fetched.
I know. But if you hear him tell the story, you can kind of tell it really happened. But there's 2 different types of AMA, Ask Me Anything, groups on Reddit.
Mm-hmm.
And there's one that's called IAMA, like I am a. And with that one, the moderators of that subreddit go through all the verification. And they're really strict. They're really strict on making sure that whatever somebody is saying, whatever they're claiming, actually did take place. So if he's already gone through the verification with them and was allowed to go ahead and do that discussion, then I consider that sufficient.
Wow. I didn't even realize they went that far
Well, they do
with Reddit.
the group. If you just look at AMA, Ask Me Anything, there's no verification there. But that's,
Right.
I mean, and you have some decent stories in there sometimes, but I mean, that's just people can say anything, you know. And there's just a bunch of stupid stuff in there too. A lot of it is, you know, I got nothing better to do with my time. Ask me anything. Well, who cares, right? So, but I scroll through that, and you know, I find some decent ones. I found the one about the guy that gave his kidney to a stranger. I found him in AMA, and he lives actually not too far from me here.
Really?
I'm in the Tampa Bay area of Florida, and I'm in over by Clearwater, and he's over in Tampa.
I was down there a couple years ago. Actually,
Yeah.
we've got family down there.
Oh, okay. And where are you?
Yeah. I'm outside of Dayton, Ohio.
Oh, home of the Hamvention.
Yep, the Hamvention,
I
which
was
is no longer at the Hare Arena anymore. I can't remember where it's at now.
I have been to that. I was I grew up in just outside of Columbus and got my ham radio license when I was 16, and so I've been to that ham radio convention.
And so you'd have been at the one at the Hare Arena.
I guess. I mean, it was 40 years ago. So
yeah, that would have been at Hare Arena. That place is no longer there. It got taken out by a tornado.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Well, it was already closed and they weren't doing anything with it. And I guess the tornado took care of the rest of it for them.
Yep.
So, yeah, that's cool. Small world, man.
Yeah.
So you're one of those guys, you're a jack of all trades?
Sort of. I mean, I have a lot of varied interests.
Right.
I'm really interested in human endurance, and I mean, I've done some ultra marathons. That's
ultra marathon.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What's an ultra marathon?
An ultra marathon is any foot race that's longer than the traditional marathon distance, which is 26.2 miles.
So there's things out there that there's actual marathons that's 27.2 miles.
Well, the most common distances are 50K, which is a little over 30 miles, 31 miles. And then there's the 50 miler. And then there's the 100K, which is about a little over 62 miles. And then there's the 100 miler. And then beyond that, you get some really long distance ones. And some people have done all of them.
What's the highest you've done so far?
I did a 100 miler about a year and a half ago.
Really?
Mm-hmm. And I'm really slow. So it took me 43 hours. But
well, I mean, you still did it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Which, you know, that's still a lot to say for that. I mean, who in the right mind besides you goes out and, hey, I'm not gonna run a 100-mile race.
You'd be surprised how many people do it.
Yeah. Well, I know there's a lot of runners around here. We've got the Air Force Marathon and stuff like that. My wife used to run all the time before she had back surgery, and I follow a lot of runners on Facebook and stuff like that. But I had no clue. I did hear about like double marathons and stuff like that, but nothing like to that extent.
Yeah, it is kind of crazy, but there are. I mean, some. It's been said that 100 miles is the new marathon. It's like, you know, a marathon, anybody can do that. Not to discount the effort. I mean, people that run marathons, that's still a lot of training and a lot of effort to go into that. But it's, you know, you look at how many marathons there are all over the U.S., all over the world, and it's, I mean, it's very common now. It used to be you run a marathon, that was like, wow, how does anybody run 26 miles?
Right.
You know, it's.
Yeah, I almost walk that every day though, so I can kind of see how they do it now. Yeah. So what got you into that?
Well, I started running as a teenager, and I'm just fascinated by Well, like I said, by human endurance and how people are capable of a lot more than they think they are. And, when I would see or I would read stories about these people that would, run these incredibly long distances, I just thought it was really interesting. And for me, when I was running as a teenager, I would do 5Ks and 10Ks. That's like 6 miles. And I remember even as recently as 2012, I was going to run. There's a local marathon or half marathon here, 13 miles. And I was nervous that I was going to be able to finish that. And that was in 2012. That was only 7 years ago. And I ended up getting injured. I didn't even run that race. So my first long race like that wasn't even a half marathon. It was a full marathon over on the other coast of Florida. It's called the Space Coast Marathon, very popular for first-time marathoners. And I just thought it was just incredible. But at the end of that race, I thought, man, if I was going to do a 50K, that means at the end of this marathon, I'd have to go another 5 miles after that. And I was about ready to drop. My leg muscles were cramping. And how could I ever possibly go 50K? But then I did that. And it's funny when you're doing a race, like a 50-mile race, the marathon distance, you just go past it. You don't even think about it like at the end of a race. It's like, yep, okay, there. I just did a marathon. I'm about halfway there. And
I'm halfway there. Oh man. Yeah, I think what's his name? Eddie Izzard does stuff like that. Are you familiar with him?
Heard the name,
or
yeah.
Her?
Yeah, I've heard the name.
I'm not sure which way Eddie refers to himself because he's transgender. He's a comedian, or she's a comedian, but he goes out and does those like double marathons, and I can't imagine it because I'm a mailman, so I walk about almost 20 miles a day, and it's just like, how do people run that?
Right.
And run 2 of them in a day. It's just like, and you're not getting paid for it. At least I'm getting paid to do it, man.
That's true. It took me a long time. The very first one that I did it wasn't a distance race. It was a time race, which means it was just 24 hours. And it was a loop, a 3.3 mile loop through the woods on a trail. So you do this loop over and over and over. And of course you see the aid station every 3 miles, which is kind of nice. And you go as long as you can in 24 hours. Was it 24? Maybe it was 12 hours. I don't remember which one I did first. But that night or that day or whatever, I did 41 miles. And at the end of that, again, I was just completely done. I couldn't go anymore. And for a long time, I thought, man, there is no way in the world that I would ever be able to do 100 miles. But, you just got to change your perspective and think other people do this. If other people can do it, why can't I do it? And, I just trained a lot. And the funny thing is, I trained for a whole year getting ready to do that. And about a week before the race, my dad passed away.
Oh, man.
And so, we had the funeral, family was coming into town, and I didn't do the race. So I trained for a whole other year after that. And that one I did do.
And how long did that take you to do that one?
That was the 100-miler that I was training.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was 43 hours. But the thing is, you get to the end of something like that, and you've just done it. There's no denying that you just completed something, and it was the most difficult thing I'd ever attempted. And so you got to wonder, if I can do this, what else am I capable of that I don't think I can do? It gives you
hold your breath for 10 minutes.
Well, I have never tried. I've never tried that, but some people.
I don't know.
Well, David.
There's some crazy. Yeah, I was getting ready to say David Blaine,
Mm-hmm.
but that's like a test of endurance.
Yeah. Oh, he does some crazy human endurance stuff. Being inside a block of ice for hours, and I don't know how many hours he was in there, or standing on top of that pole for as long as he did. I mean, that is real human endurance, and he dedicates himself to being able to do it.
Now, were you prior military or anything like that, or is
No.
this just something? Hey, you started running as a teenager, and you're like, I want to see how far I can push myself now.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that's
100 miles is it. I'm certainly not going to do 200 miles. Although there are people that do that too. But for what it took to do 100 miles, you almost have to be training full time. And, I got too much other stuff going on right now. And I already proved that I can do 100. So now what I like to do now is I crew other runners. Like there's a race here in this area, and there's actually a trail called the Pinellas Trail, and it's a paved trail, it's like a bike trail, but a lot of walkers and runners use it, and it's 46 miles. And so every year, the Saturday before Labor Day, they have this race called the Pinellas Trail Challenge. And so what I do is I take my bike and I got a little trailer, and I pull the trailer has a cooler with ice and water and stuff to eat, stuff like that, and I crew a particular runner so that the runner can go the whole way. They don't have to worry about carrying food with them or carrying drinks or anything like that. I'm carrying everything for them, and so that's what I do now.
Yeah, you're still involved with it though, and you're helping other people out. That's pretty good, man. So you said you're on the slower side on that thing. What would be like the fastest someone can do 100 miles? Do you know?
Well, the goal for most runners that are decent speeds, the big goal is to do sub 24 hours. And I would never be able to come close to that. A friend of mine just did his first 100 miler. It was a point-to-point race on an actual trail with a little bit of, it's kind of a technical trail, so roots and rocks and trees, stuff like that. And it was his first 100 mile, and but he's built for running, and he's really fast, and he did it like 25 something. So
wow.
But there are people that do 100 miles in 14, 16 hours.
I mean, I can believe it. That's just still. I mean, that's. Just even, oh man!
The fun.
I hate driving 100 miles, let alone trying to think about running it, man.
That's something that ultra runners often hear. I don't even like driving that far, or they'll say I don't run that far unless something's chasing me. Those are the common things. But the funny thing is, I was out riding my bike, and I keep track of how far I go and how fast I go and stuff like that. And I ride my bike at pretty decent speed. I mean, it's not a racing bike. It's just it's a hybrid bike, but I like to try to keep going fast enough that I'm getting a workout, keep my heart rate up and all that. So I would go out and do, 5 or 10 miles at this pretty good speed. And then I calculated that the speed that I was going, that's the speed that the winner of the Boston Marathon, that's how fast he's running. And he's doing it for over 2 hours.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, because
that's some endurance right there, man.
It's incredible. I mean, to think that if like one of those, I mean, they're world-class runners too. I mean, they're running marathons in like 2 hours and 10 minutes. But for me I don't know if I'd be able to keep up with them over that 2 hours, even on my bike.
Well, that's why you roll up on them and hit them in the leg with like a crowbar or something.
Okay.
Then you ain't got to keep up. You just pass them.
Mm-hmm.
That's just sinful thinking, man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, I couldn't imagine that either. I was in the Army, And they go, well, by the time you're out of boot camp, you're going to be able to road march 25 miles. And I'm like, what? And the whole time you're prepping for it. Then you find out it ain't straight up walking either. You're doing different obstacles and stuff and different maneuvers and stuff like that throughout it. And it's just like, oh my goodness.
Mm-hmm.
But everyone did it. It's amazing, man.
Yeah.
Stuff like the Navy SEALs go through. I work with a Navy SEAL, actually. Hopefully going to have him on a show one of these days. But just some of the stories he's told me and about their training and stuff. And I'm just like floored. Then you're sitting here telling me, yeah, I ran a 100-mile marathon. I'm like, I just don't get it, man.
You can always do more than you think you can. You know, there's a book, I forget what the name of it is now, something about 30 Days with a SEAL, or I Lived with a SEAL, or something like that. This guy invited a Navy SEAL to live with him, with his family for a month, and to show him, you know, how to train, how to be disciplined, how to this. And so the first day they went to a gym, and the SEAL, I wish I could remember his name. I got to look this up. He told him, okay, do some pull-ups, do as many pull-ups as you can, or I want you to do 100 pull-ups. And so the guy hadn't been training or anything, but he was not completely out of shape, but he did like 15, 20, 25 pull-ups, and he was just exhausted. He couldn't do any more. And he said, nope, you can do more. So he walked around a little bit, came back, did a couple more, and he said, we're not leaving until you do 100. And it took a while, but he finally did get to 100. And the point of that whole thing is, when you think you're done, you're only about 40% done. That's the number that they use as a guideline, or he uses as a guideline.
Right.
That when you think you're done, you're worn out, you can't do anything else, but you're about 40% done.
That's a good philosophy to have.
Mm-hmm. It's probably true,
especially
too.
with especially with how I don't know. I believe a lot of societies become more lazy, if you know what I mean.
Yep.
So I'm not trying to single anyone out particularly or anything like that, but you always hear about people not wanting to get out and do things, or they're too tired. And I mean, it's the same thing with like weightlifting and stuff like that as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's just a matter of putting the time in. You know, you just got to be consistent about it. And the name of that book, it's a book. It's called Living with a SEAL: 31 Days Training with the Toughest Man on the Planet. And the author is Jesse Itzler. It's on Amazon. Pretty cool book.
I've heard of that book. I'm gonna have to get that one.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna have to check that out. But I do remember hearing about that one now.
Yep.
So, man, that's awesome, man. You've got some good insight, man. Got some good insight. That's all positivity too, man.
Yeah, I am an optimist.
Yeah. Well, you're an optimist. I'm just an asshole. So.
Well. Everyone has their place in the world, right?
Yeah, I guess, man. No, but so where can everyone? Let's do some plugs for you, man.
Okay.
Let's plug your computer podcast, because there's a lot of people like my mother. She's not a very technical person. She's calling me, but hey, you said you still have a blog and this, that, and another.
Sure. Let's
plug all that stuff right there, man.
I live in Florida, and so it's pretty common for me to get a phone call from someone saying, hey, I'm in Chicago, or I'm up in Connecticut or whatever, but my parents have retired and they're living there in the Tampa Bay area. And I looked you up on the internet and they need help with their computer. Can you go over and help them? And that's what I do, because, you know, we got such a big elderly population here in Florida. And so, yeah, I do the podcast. That podcast is called The Computer Tutor. and it's every 2 weeks. It's every other Monday, and you can. My website is computertutorflorida.com, and you can subscribe to my email newsletter if you want to get that as well. And I work on computers all over the country because, of course, I can remote in, and as long as the computer still connects to the internet, I can fix just about anything that's coming up. And the thing that people should be aware of now, if your computer's still running Windows 7, you've only got till the end of the year. You've got to either upgrade that computer to Windows 10, or you got to get a new computer, which would obviously already have Windows 10, because Windows 7 support is going away at the end of this year. So I've been doing a lot of the Windows 7 to Windows 10 upgrades, and I can do that completely remotely as well.
See, I don't even know that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a Mac guy, so.
Okay.
So, oh man, I gotta ask, and so how many computer issues are usually porn issues?
Well, it's funny. Those porn sites are very. It's very common to get viruses and malware and everything from those sites. But for my clients, it's not really an issue, because I offer this thing called the Managed Service Plan, and it includes a good, strong antivirus, unlimited virus removal, and it keeps their other software up to date, because that's another big source of problems is outdated software, because it gets exploited, and they can get in and do all kinds of bad stuff. So people that have that Managed Service Plan, they don't get viruses, or very rarely. I mean, of course, the weakest link is the user, and if you click on enough bad stuff, you can mess up your computer. But people that have gotten that, I've got a few hundred people that are on that plan, and I never have to do virus removals from their computer, even if they do go to sketchy websites.
Well, I just have to ask, because I probably have a bunch of depraved degenerates listening to my show, so
no,
just throwing that out there for them. Oh, you act so surprised.
Well, I looked at your podcast logo, and I hadn't listened to your show before you had contacted me, and but I would look at the podcast cover art, the artwork, and I don't know, there's something just a little bit dark about it.
I'm not dark. I just like darker stuff per se. But I'm getting ready to redesign all that stuff again. And more. I don't know yet. I'm reworking some things.
Okay.
But yeah.
Hey, a lot of podcasts do that, rebranding.
Yeah, that's what I've been working on. That's why I reached out and started looking for people like you, man. You've got a great story. And what was I already know it, but remind everyone the name of the other podcast, which I'm going to be doing some binging the next couple of days to get through these.
That show is called What Was That Like? And you can get that on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher Radio, iHeartRadio, Radio Public, Pocket Casts, just about any podcast player, really. Or you can just go right to the website, which is whatwasthatlike.com.
And do you have any social media sites set up for any of those?
Oh yeah. Actually, if you go to the website, whatwasthatlike.com, over on the right side will be links to all of my social media stuff. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I guess those are the biggest ones.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to hop on there and follow the rest of your accounts as well. But yeah, that's
one other thing I should mention, there are a few guests that I'm looking for. If someone listening to this has an unusual story, some of the ones that I'm looking for specifically are someone that has survived falling off a cruise ship while it's underway, someone that's been rescued after being buried in an avalanche, someone that won the showcase on Price is Right, someone that was falsely accused of child sex offenses and then later exonerated, or someone that's been wrongly imprisoned for more than 10 years and then found innocent and exonerated. So those are some of the ones that I'm particularly looking for. I was looking for quite a while. I was looking for somebody that survived a plane crash, and just interviewed that person this week. So that'll be on an upcoming episode.
How do you come up with these like Price is Right? How did you even think about that one?
I don't know. I just thought, you see somebody on the show, and to me, that's where my mind goes. I mean, how did they, how'd they get in the audience, and what's the behind the scenes stuff? Do they tell you to act really super crazy and wild like that, like they all do? And, what did you win? How much, what were your taxes on that $50,000 showcase? Did you have to sell some of it in order to be able to keep the rest of it? Or, there's just questions that come into my mind. And I think, I should talk to somebody that's actually done it.
Wow. I mean, that's a lot of, that's a lot of questions just from watching the show, man. That's very thorough, man. I won't even think about that. I was just like, since Bob Barker ain't on there anymore, I don't even watch that show in years. So
no, I haven't either. I don't watch any television, but that's a show that everybody's familiar with it. Everybody knows how it works and all that. So
yeah. That's crazy. Then the Avalanche one, I don't think that'd be a good one.
Yeah, but I mean, to me, that's a story like that. I put myself in that person's predicament. I mean, you're just going down a hill and all of a sudden you're buried in snow and you can't move and you can't breathe. Just that I'd like to hear firsthand, what that was like, especially when they saw daylight because someone found them and dug them out.
Man, I can't even think of anyone like that. I know they're out there.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Well, my very first episode was a young lady in Texas who accidentally killed someone. And that happens all the time. But
yeah,
when that happened to her, she was going through all kinds of psychological stuff, that she was responsible for the death of another person. And was she going to be charged for that? How do you explain to your young children that mommy might have to go to prison? And the financial, paying for a lawyer to defend yourself, not to mention the guilt and, just so many different factors in it. And so I got really fortunate to have her as my first guest because she was a great storyteller. And I was able to get the actual 911 audio that she made from the scene. She called 911 while she was right there with the guy on the motorcycle in the road, because she'd pulled out in an intersection at nighttime, didn't see the motorcycle approaching from the left, and he hit her car. And he was there barely conscious, and that's where she called 911. And I got that audio and played it as part of the episode. And it had happened 2 years ago, and she had not heard that audio herself. And so she had to have her therapist listen to it first and kind of work up to it, because she was still going through the process of, the psychological baggage of going through that experience. But she was finally able to listen to it.
Yeah. Because a lot of people don't realize the process or how much that really takes a toll on someone,
Right.
And there's people out there that don't heal from. There's soldiers that don't heal from that mentally.
Yep.
So, man, now I gotta go listen to that one. I'm just gonna have to go to listen to every episode, and all my listeners need to go listen to every one of these episodes, because these are all great stories, man. I could sit here and pick your brain apart for each and every one, but I think I'd run out of space on my hard drive, man.
Well, I'm happy to talk about them, because if they're interesting enough for me to say, yeah, I want you to be on my show, I want you to tell the story, then it's got to be a really interesting story.
Yeah. God. Yeah. I just like talking to people in general, just to see who's out there, who's doing what. And you're talking about ultra marathons and people eating their own feet. And yeah, this is a good pick, Scott. Great pick.
Well, that's good. I enjoyed talking with you. That was when you did the online thing where you're saying, "Hey, who wants to come on my show?" And yeah, I'm glad we connected.
Yeah. Yeah. Adam and it's not Elias, the guys that started that group. You know, I've talked to them. It's been pretty close to a year now, and I am so glad they put that group together and people are getting together and finding each other like that, because, you know, I didn't know, like, you're telling me about Reddit and stuff like this, and hey, you're helping me out to broaden my horizons as well, because I'm old school, man. I'm just used to the Facebook thing here and there and stuff.
Man, you've got to get on Reddit. There's a group on Reddit. Each of the discussion groups on Reddit is called a subreddit, and there's a subreddit called podcasting, and this is it's just made up of people who either have a podcast or want to have a podcast, and there's over 20,000 people in that group. There's another one called Podcasts, plural, and these are people who listen to podcasts, and they talk to each other, and they recommend podcasts to each other, and that's all they talk about. And there's over 600,000 people in that group. So you go on there and do a little post saying, "Hey, I'm looking for people to come on my show." You're going to get all kinds of response.
Really?
Yep. Probably more than you do on Facebook, probably.
Wow. I appreciate that, man. That's like I said, I'm so old school. I suck at Twitter. Everything else, I'm surprised this show's still going.
I'm not a huge Twitter fan either. I mean, I use Twitter and I post on it regularly. So I have when I post on Instagram, it automatically posts to Twitter. I like Instagram a lot more, and I get a lot more engagement. But I post. Are you on Instagram at all?
Yeah, I'm on there. I gotta start getting better at it and using it more. I had someone run my accounts because I actually own a small company outside of here for like beard care products, and they were running my Instagram stuff. That's where all the sinful stuff came from, by the way.
Okay.
My beard oil company.
Yeah, and you've got I remember seeing pictures of you. You got the ZZ Top beard going, right?
Yeah. ZZ Top, Viking, however you want to say it. But I had someone running that, and they're not doing their job as well as they used to. So I'm gonna have to start taking care of that stuff on my own.
Well, you should go look at my Instagram account. The Instagram is it's what was that like, and I post. Almost every day, I post something really unusual. And of course, when I have a new episode come out on the show, that's my post. But on the other days, it's just really unusual things, stuff that you wouldn't normally see.
Right. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show, man.
Sure. Hey, it's been a blast.